Hi, I'm Lizzie from the Health Recovery Centre. Thank you for joining us here today for our presentation of mental health and the microbiome and how those things connect. So again, thank you. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? So, as I said, I'm Lizzie. I'm from the Health Recovery Centre. I am a naturopath who specialises in digestive and mental health conditions. So the majority of my clientele are coming for that. However, that does often lead out to other things. So our most common complaints in the clinic are mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, and OCD, insomnia, so not falling asleep, not staying asleep, fatigue, so chronic fatigue syndrome, or that persistent reliance on caffeine, cognitive issues, brain fog, attention deficit disorders, misplacing objects. This is the same for kids as well, same issues. Digestive concerns such as IBS, constipation, diarrhea, food intolerances, or wind, or the alternative, which is when you go and you go through all of your testing, you have colonoscopies, endoscopies, and all those things, and you get sent home and told that it's a mental health issue. I mean, the two are connected, but certainly it's not psychosomatic. There's a clear digestive problem there. Pain, so chronic pain, tight or stiff muscles, always usually across the top of your shoulders. Headaches that are associated with that, immune issues, so regular colds, flus, autoimmunity, and disordered eating and substance use disorders. So they're all the things that tie together under this one banner. So at the moment in the mainstream system, we have a few different ways that we treat mental health. So we used to treat mental health back in the 16th century as a physical concern. So it was treated with rest, herbal remedies, astrology, and religious counsel, which sounds pretty reasonable. By the 1800s, asylums became very common. So we then started using drugs, all sorts of drugs actually, including malaria injections and insulin injections, most often resulting in death. So those treatments didn't work so well, but I guess the person wasn't unhappy anymore. Experimental surgeries were introduced, so lobotomies and electric shock therapies were also introduced in the 1800s. Scarily enough, in our mainstream mental health system now, we're still using those same practices. So it's absolutely mind-boggling that we're still literally torturing people and expecting them to get well. We still use psychosurgery as well, which is, you know, similar to the old lobotomy. So we use that in resistant mental illnesses now. Thankfully, we've stopped burning witches and performing exorcisms, but only just. Alrighty. So in my opinion, in the Health Recovery Centre, we're trying to start a revolution. So we want the mental health system to be entirely different. We want to be treating it as the physical problem it is. We want to stop telling people that when they come in with these host of symptoms that they're not connected and that, you know, it's psychosomatic, and stop going through the same rigmarole that we do now. So at the moment, we're just using drug therapies and psychotherapy, and neither of them are really cutting the mustard. So I'm not saying that neither are valuable. I'm just saying that we're not quite getting there, are we? So 45% of Australians will suffer a mental illness in their lifetime. That's a fairly whopping statistic, considering that when you look at, you know, you think about half your family, there's a good chance that there's a good proportion of those with a mental illness at some stage. In 2020, we lost 3,139 people to suicide, which is just a phenomenal statistic for a developed country with so many, you know, opportunities. So it's actually 9 people per day, nearly 9 people per day. During the same 12-month period, we had 278 victims of homicide. So you're much more likely to die at your own hand in this country than we are to die at the hands of somebody else. Which is a fairly horrific statistic. 1 in 5 Australians reported having a mental health issue in 2020. So that's the same rate as in 2017, pre-COVID. So we've talked a lot lately about how COVID's caused us all to have a mental health crisis. That's not true. This country had a mental health crisis much before COVID ever was even thought of. So we really needed to address it decades ago. In fact, I feel like some of our services were better back then than they are now, but at least we're still trying, we're still talking about it, we're still trying to make things better. 99 deaths by suicide occurred among children and adolescents in 2020. So that's kids aged 5 to 17, which is a pretty horrific statistic. Imagine feeling that you had that little hope at that age. So mental health is physical. So to show us how these things all connect. So basically what happens is we get under stress and we have a stress hormone elevation. And that stress hormone elevation flows onto a change in digestive bacteria because our stress hormones shut off our gastric acid production. That gastric acid production being shut off means more pathogenic bacteria get through instead of being killed in the stomach. And also it means that we have changes in the pH further down in the digestive system, which is where some of our most essential bacteria live. It also, that change in digestive bacteria causes a change in neurochemistry. So effectively, our digestive bacteria produce most of our neurochemistry. So we have to have the right bacteria to have the right neurochemistry. So we end up with a neurochemistry deficit, which makes us feel, we lose our capacity to actively problem solve. So that in turn increases our stress hormones again, which is worse digestive bacteria, worse neurochemistry, worse stress hormones, and then it goes on from there. So the main causes of our mental health conditions are neurochemistry, hormonal factors, so stress hormones and sex hormones, microbiome imbalance, so our digestive bacteria, nutritional deficiencies, genetic factors and environmental factors. And we're going to explore all of these today. So the first one is neurochemistry. So our neurotransmitters are literally recipes. So they're all based on proteins. So first, we have to have a good acid production and a good ingestion of protein. So we need to make sure we're eating enough protein. If we don't eat enough protein, we end up in a situation where we have that deficit and our body pinches from our brain. The third thing that we really need is good digestive enzyme release, which is dependent on gastric acid as well. I'm sorry, I'm sure you can all hear my neighbour's dogs barking there. The fourth thing we need is good bacterial species. So we need good levels of E. coli and good levels of Enterococcus. So we have, once we've got all of those ducks in a row, we have our ingested protein. From there, it's literally a recipe. So we have to have the right proteins and then the right micronutrients to be able to make those pathways complete. So to make serotonin, we need our tryptophan, which is our protein, with the help of E. coli, some folate, iron, B3 and calcium, it converts through to 5-HTP. And then from there, with the help of magnesium, B6 and zinc and vitamin C, we go through to serotonin. So it's literally just a recipe. If you have the right nutrients, the pathways work. Here we have some of our neurotransmitters. You can see that the same neurotransmitters associated with anxiety are also associated with depression. And likewise for ADHD, pain, for memory issues, for sleep issues, for cognitive deficits. So you'll see the same things over and over again. We have sort of 12 major behavioral neurotransmitters, and a lot of them cross over into those symptom pictures. So low neurochemistry causes depression, aggression, low mood. It causes anxiety or repetitive and intrusive thoughts, OCD symptoms, addictions or reward pathways, mental arousal and sensory input issues. So you'll see some people are just like, I can't go out, it's too bright, it's too loud, really overwhelmed in those environments. Stress tolerance issues, eating, drinking and appetite behaviours, sugar cravings, alcoholism, drug taking. Sleep-wake cycle issues, so sleep quality issues, sleep duration issues, digestion and digestive acid production, which causes an issue with digestive enzymes, and peristalsis, which is the movement of the bowel and the stimulus to evacuate, so constipation and diarrhea. Attention span, so memory, learning ability, thought processing. So our neurochemistry does a ton, and neurochemistry is dependent on digestive bacteria. So let's move on to digestive bacteria now. So we know one thing it does, and that's make neurotransmitters. It does a whole heap of other things as well. So it produces butyrate, which is the main product in our cellular energy production. So if we don't have enough of the right bacteria, we get chronic fatigue syndrome. It provides essential fatty acids for hormone synthesis. It provides most of our B12 and assists in the production of vitamin D, K, and other essential nutrients. So if we don't have the right bacteria, we can't even absorb nutrients through the sun like vitamin D. So it's very interesting that we can't utilize those without bacteria. It assists with protein, fat, and carbohydrate digestion. It's responsible for around 80% of our IgA immunity, which is our first line of defense against infection. So these people with low digestive bacteria or the wrong digestive bacteria might have regular colds and flus, mouth ulcers, things like that, or repeated infections, fungal infections. Or it might go the other way and they get autoimmune conditions. Rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis are all associated with specific bacteria. And our digestive bacteria also cause or reduce inflammation and therefore impact our liver function. So there's a lot of debate about whether we have good and bad bacteria or if we just have bacteria. So here we don't like to say bad bacteria too much because you can see that a lot of them cross over. So Clostridial species, Clostridial species are totally normal. They're here in the other guys column because if you have too many, they make you very sick. But they're here in the helpful and essential bacteria too, because if you don't have enough, then you don't make amines effectively. So it's about having the right bacteria in the right quantities. So E. coli is another common one. Everyone thinks that E. coli is a really bad guy. So we cover ourselves in hand sanitizers and we take antibacterial things to get rid of E. coli. If we don't have enough E. coli in the gut, we don't make neurochemistry. We get constipation. We get chronic mental health issues. So E. coli is absolutely essential. To test and treat the microbiome, I use BioScreen Medical. It's a quantitative test. It tells us the species, the quantity, and then we can treat it from there. So there's no good just knowing yes or no. It's no good just going, yes, there's strep or yes, there's E. coli. We need to know how much because that's actually all that's relevant. You know, 5% E. coli is way, way, way too low. 100% E. coli is too high. We have to get it in the right level there to make everything work effectively. So BioScreen Medical is a cultured testing option, not a DNA testing option. This is an example of a BioScreen test. You can see here that the bacterial quantities are low. So even this E. coli here is low at, 1.7 by 10 to the power of 6. So we definitely need more E. coli there. This person's going to be experiencing depression, mental health issues. You can see that there's low Bacteroides. They're going to have really bad fatigue. Low Eubacterium, low lactobacillus, which means that they're not getting those, what little neurotransmitters are being made by E. coli aren't making it to the brain effectively because lactobacillus plays a role in that. They also have very high Clostridial species. So this is very bad brain fog. This person's going to be really struggling to concentrate on the daily. Going back to this, if you swap those around and you had high Bacteroides or good levels of Bacteroides, good levels of lactobacillus and low Clostridium, you'd have a very, very healthy person. So again, it's not the bacteria, it's not whether it's there or not there, it's how much is there that's relevant. So hormones, so stress hormones is a big one. So our stress hormones are our primary hormones. They affect our ability to cope with stress, obviously, that's why they're called stress hormones. They also impact our sleep-wake cycle, our energy production, motivation, mood. They regulate our blood sugar and therefore our weight. So if our stress hormones are all over the shop, then we'll end up with weight gain or weight loss, or we can end up with chronic blood sugar issues. Even the onset of diabetes can be associated with changes in these stress hormones. And then from there, we have our secondary hormones, which are our sex hormones. So these have to be out of whack generally to get these sex hormones out of whack. So if you're experiencing PCOS or endometriosis or female hormonal cancers, have a look back here. If you can correct these stress hormone and primary hormone pathways, these often self-correct. This is an example. So progesterone, cortisol in the same pathway, our DHEA, which is another stress hormone, and our testosterone and estrogens are all in the same pathway. So they all link through together. You have to have the right ones. This is an example of a person, this is a naturopath test. So I use naturopaths to do my salivary cortisol testing. You can see this person has high morning cortisol or higher end morning cortisol and then tapering off throughout the day. This person's going to be feeling a bit overwhelmed. They're going to be feeling a bit agitated, probably a bit anxious, a bit wired, yet still fatigued. Irritability, certainly. They're going to be bruising much more easily. And then likewise, this person is going to have a similar list of symptoms. However, their cortisol is quite low, but they're still going to be feeling fatigued. They're still going to be exhausted. They're still going to be feeling stressed. So we need to make sure that our stress and our cortisol are on the same level. If there's a deficit of either, if either one exceeds the other, then we're going to end up with emotional instability. And we're all also just going to be feeling terrible. You feel really lousy when these things get out of whack. You can see here the variance you can have in these sex hormones. So this is the same test as the original slide. So the high cortisol usually results in low progesterone, not in every case, but in a lot of cases. This person's got high testosterone, which means they're going to have the teariness and emotional instability of low progesterone, but also the frustration of high testosterone. So it's going to be a very, very agitated human here. You can see they also have high E3, and our E3 is one of our protective estrogens. So when you see a high E3 in a non-menopausal or non-pregnant woman, you have to consider something's, pretty chronic stress conditions going on there, or potentially some other conditions, but definitely you need to look at that. Our next one is genetics. So our MTHFR is a common thing that people are talking about now. And so MTHFR disorders, I actually don't do MTHFR gene testing. And the reason why is because I think the genes are relevant. So you can have both parents having a gene mutation and you having that gene mutation, and then you can still have normal methylation. So all that matters is that methylation working? Because it doesn't matter what the gene is. And the other thing about genes is they're changeable, not genes, sorry. Our methylation is changeable regardless of the fact that the gene isn't. So the gene doesn't change, but the methylation does, which tells us that we need to test methylation. We don't need to test the gene. These are some typical symptoms of over and under methylation. I write down here, do they exist? I don't think there is such a thing as an over methylator or an under methylator. If it was that simple, we'd just go, okay, which boxes do you tick, and we treat accordingly. It's never that simple, which is why I always test those methylation pathways if I suspect that being an issue. This is what our methylation pathways look like. The most important things we need to remember about methylation is that it's reliant on good nutrition and good gut bacteria. So once there's a gut bacterial issue, your methylation pathways won't work. And it's changeable, not permanent. So the gene doesn't change, but the methylation pathways do. So you can see here, this is the same person. So May 2020, we've got low homocysteine, low copper, very low free copper, low CME, low SAH, low zinc, very, very high histamine at 107. So this person's going to be feeling very lousy. And then, a year or so later, their methylation pathways are almost exactly the opposite. So low histamine, high copper, high homocysteine, high free copper, and higher N-CME. So this is the same person with the same genes, but two different methylation profiles. So it just goes to show there's no point testing the gene. You can if you want, but it doesn't help you anyway. You still have to know this, which is what we should be testing and treating. Nutritional deficiencies is a big one. Like we talked about before, we have some nutrition that comes from bacteria and some nutrition that comes from what we put in our mouth, so exogenous and endogenous bacteria nutrition. So we need to make sure both of those are working. If you don't have the right bacteria, you have poor nutrition, full stop. So, people say, how can we have nutrition in this day and age in Australia? It's very easy. We are a very clean country. We are very quick to kill bacteria. We love hand sanitizer. We love antibacterial agents. We're very fortunate to have access to antibiotics, but some of us access those a bit too frequently, or especially in previous decades, they were very readily handed out by GPs because we didn't have the understanding of how those bacteria would mutate and how much worse things would get if we kept doing that. Environmental factors. This is a big one. So trauma is massive. So an ACE score, which is an adverse childhood event score, if you have ACE scores of 4 or above, it nearly doubles your risk of heart disease and lung cancer. So you can see this physically impacts your body. It increases your likelihood of becoming an alcoholic by 700%. It's not hard to have 4 ACE scores. One of these questions might be, did your parents divorce? Was there domestic violence in the home? Was there alcohol or drug abuse in the home? Was there other mental health conditions in the home? Did a family member or person living in the home attempt or, succeed with suicide? So it's pretty easy to get there. There's quite a few questions, and a lot of our homes have these things. I mean, with 2 in 3, marriages ending in divorce, most people are ticking their divorce box. A lot of people have a mentally unwell family member in the home. We saw back at the start, 45% of people get a mental health condition at some point. So there's a good chance that in the 18 years you live with your parents, one of them is going to be experiencing that. So, it's very easy to have that, and that intergenerational trauma really is impactful. Automatically, it causes an increase of our stress hormones. Once our stress hormones go up, what happens? Our digestive bacteria drops off. Again, that flows through to our neurochemistry. Low neurochemistry means worse digestive bacteria, and so on. Once we end up in a situation where we've been doing this for a really long time, we're experiencing all of this, once we have it as a kid, it's very hard to normalize our stress hormones into adulthood because our stress responses are sensitized. Stress is another big one, obviously. Exposure to toxins, so workplace toxins, other toxins also affect us. Sleep quality is huge. So we all know what kids are like without sleep. It's exactly the same in adulthood, except we learn to self-regulate our behavior. So instead of kicking and screaming, we just do it on the inside. Our employment is a big factor, and our social interactions are also huge. So we really need to make sure that all of these things are getting addressed. But at the same time, the physical damage that these other conditions have caused has to be addressed to correct these as well. You can't sleep if you don't have the right neurochemistry, the right stress hormones, the right methylation pathways. Likewise, you can't get rid of toxins. You're not likely to have gainful employment if you can't think your way out of any problem because your brain is so foggy because you've got a gut full of streptococcus. So, these things all tie together. So again, I'm going to draw you a little picture now, which is always interesting because I'm not an artist. So here we have, that same picture. I obviously draw this a bit. So we have our 3 things, as we discussed. We have stress hormone elevation, which impacts digestive bacteria, which impacts our neurochemistry, which impacts our stress hormones, digestive bacteria, neurochemistry. So once we get stuck in this cycle, things get really out of whack. We then start to show up with nutritional deficiencies. And you guessed it, that affects digestion, it affects neurochemistry, it affects stress hormones, and likewise, all backwards. Then we start to show methylation concerns, with or without the gene. So our methylation affects our stress hormones, it affects our neurochemistry, it affects our digestive system, it affects our and it affects our nutritional levels, and vice versa. So in amongst all of this as well, we have immunity, which plays roles here, here, and here. So you can see that there's all of these things tying together. You have to treat them as one. We can't, think that none of these things are connected. And we certainly can't be having someone go back and back and back to the doctor and be told that their digestive issues are psychosomatic. We need to look at it. Why is it psychosomatic? What does that even mean? What are they trying to say? Where is that connection? Why do we think that they're just a bit nutty? I mean, this is a physical problem. This isn't a nutty person. This is a person here with chronic digestive disorder, with nutritional deficiencies because of it. They can't think. They can't interact with their family. Their lives are falling apart because their neurochemistry is just gone. Their stress hormones are so high that they can't manage things, and their methylation is all out of whack. Why are we then treating this person like they're just a little bit nutty and they can think their way out of this? You cannot think your way out of this problem. You have to correct all of these neurochemical changes. Okay, so Now you know how it all ties together. If you'd like more information, you can contact us at the Health Recovery Centre. So you can either get on healthrecoverycentre.com.au, which will have a lot of information. You probably already found this video there. Or you can contact us on by phone or on our contact us site on that same website. So feel free to have a look through our site. There's loads of information there. We do offer a free 30-minute consultation. So if you want to, once you've had a look at a bit of that data, if you think, this is me, I'm ticking all of these boxes. I'm in pain, I'm not sleeping, I'm, having difficulty remembering things, I'm struggling at work, I'm starting to get a bit cranky at my, partner and kids. Everything's becoming very overwhelming. Please get in touch. You don't have to live like this. It's very, in most cases, very simple and easy to correct. It's not something you have to take forever. You don't have to, live on supplements for the next 30 years. It's a matter of correcting the neurochemistry and then you get on with your life. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.